our Sunday service here at NewJ. With everything that's going on in the world around us, our leadership came together with heavy hearts, frustration, and godly anger early this week and decided that we couldn't just do church as normal today. This deserves our full attention. So many of us and you, as our members and friends, have been directly impacted by what we have seen in the last few weeks, and it just didn't feel right carrying on with church as normal. Now, we pride ourselves on our diversity, but we are a majority black church, and every single one of us could look at George Floyd and see our fathers, our brothers, our sons and nephews, and even each other as we saw his life taken in cold blood. Today, we as a church family are praying for justice and for peace as we go through these dark and difficult times as a global community. There is no place for racism or hate, and we as the body of Christ will not be silent. Now let's be clear on one thing. This is not about us and them. God created us as one, and that's how he intended us to be. Every one of us, every creed and every color makes up the complete image of what God is supposed to look like. And when we're divided, we are all incomplete. So with that in mind, we are praying for unity, but we'll also be doing the work to make sure that this time change comes and justice is done.
Honestly, in times like these, it feels like speaking is a waste of breath. Especially when it has become a rare commodity that has been stripped out of our brothers' necks, so my silence does not need a reason. What use is my voice in ears that do not listen? I cannot cure your hard of hearing. I cannot control a car I'm not steering, but I'll put direction in your direction if you choose to listen. In a world where my life in itself is a form of protest, where our life expectancy is dictated by murder in the form of citizens' arrest, where brown skin is a synonym for suspect, and the same blackness you wear for fashion is the reason we are a threat. But this is not news. And this is not a trend. If you still think that racism isn't prevalent in our society, your ignorance is louder than any cry for help. Rest in peace has become the strapline for this war. Fighting for our lives, justice was not made for us. We have to create and facilitate our own change. And whilst I don't personally sit in fear of a police officer pointing a gun at my head, I shudder at a system that chokes the life out of my future and wants my people dead. My heart hurts.
Now we're over 4,000 miles away from Minneapolis, but the pain of racial injustice travels far, and we are feeling it right here today. During today's service, we're going to try and understand more about how this has affected you, our members, and the role that the church can play in being a part of the solution and the catalyst for change that we were put here to be. To help us do this, we've invited a panel made up of NewJ members who are well placed to be a part of this conversation. So today we have with us Accredited Cognitive Behavioural Psychotherapist, Chanelle and Managing Director of the Honey Group, a national firm of solicitors, Simon Wright. And finally, Britanie Boyd, who's studying international relations at St Andrews University in Scotland. So guys, welcome to the panel today. We're really glad that you've taken the time to be with us. So the first question is targeted at all of you. And I think this week we've seen what's going on in America from Monday when we saw the murder of George Floyd. And we actually kind of seen this happen before, but it feels different to me this time. It feels like there's a bit more momentum behind the movement that's happening now. How do you feel about it? And why do you think it's different this time? And I'll start with you, Chanelle.
I think as black people, we've all experienced some sort of racism, prejudice or discrimination in some way. And I feel like this time, it's kind of like this. We all have these closets at home, and we stuff loads and loads of stuff into it. And we know that if we stuff another thing into it, when we open that door, what's going to happen? Everything's going to fall out. And I feel like with this, our own personal racial discrimination, the discrimination that our families, our friends have received, it's always something that we're filing into this cupboard and we're pushing it shut. Tamir Rice, Ahmed Arbery, you know, Mark Duggan, all of the people that we know who have died at the hands of police brutality. And I think for a lot of us, we tried to put George Floyd back into this cupboard. And instead of being able to close the door on it, everything just came spilling out instead. And I feel like that's why it feels so different this time. We can't just close the door on it. It's everything spill out. We need to kind of work on it now.
So this is almost like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Right. And Simon, for you, what's your experience?
Yeah, I think it was just too much, wasn't it? I think there's so many people that I've heard over the last kind of week that have said that, you know what, I couldn't even watch it. And I personally couldn't watch the whole 9 minutes because just that anger is your first emotion that's coming up. But for me, I think the biggest difference was the symbolism of what was going on. Because even though we've had so many guys that have been brutalized by the police in the US or in the UK, a lot of them are kind of shot in the US and it's kind of just done. But this one was very brutal. The symbolism of a white man with his knee on the neck of a black man on the ground symbolizes almost what we've been going through over the last, 300 years. And the powerlessness of those around to actually stop it happening. Yeah. So there was, you saw the film and a lot of it was people that knew it was wrong but couldn't stop it. And it was almost enough is enough, to watch a murder just in broad daylight and it's legalized, just tip that balance. Because it was so brutal, it wasn't like popping you're dead. It was actually not, I'm gonna crush your windpipe, I'm gonna break your neck. And it's not gonna be a quick thing. This is gonna be a 10-minute death. Until the guy was crying out for his mother and his mother's not even with us anymore. And it was like, to get somebody to that point, it was just, I can't breathe. I think as black people, we felt that same thing emotionally. We can't breathe either. And we really felt that not only for him that he physically couldn't breathe, but we're sick that we can't breathe in this environment.
Britanie, so for you, you're a youth representative here today on the panel. And I would say that for your generation, including ours, but yours more so, you've seen a lot more death and murders, just real deaths and real murders in your lifetime than most people would have seen, 20 years ago. And so, having seen so much, why do you think this time is different, and why do you think there's such a different level of momentum behind this movement now?
I think what is different this time is the circumstance, because I think that seeing videos of police brutality, seeing videos of black people being killed, it's nothing new, at least not to me, to my generation. Like, we see these videos time in, time out for years now. I think the difference now is the circumstance that we're in this global pandemic and people are witnessing, they're feeling their government fail them again and again. They're seeing how these institutions that are supposed to be in place to protect them, like the hospitals and the police, are failing them. And it's a thing of, you can't stay quiet anymore. Like, people can't ignore it anymore. We're all at home and we're all seeing it. You can't be at work and ignoring it. We're all seeing it. And so I feel like that circumstances of us all, everyone being in this vulnerable position, people are more angry. They're even more angry because they have even more reason to be angry. So it's called people out on the streets in the time of a pandemic, which in itself is something unheard of. So that itself is going to create momentum that we haven't seen before, that we haven't heard of before.
So I think one of the clear things that's come out of that is that for the first time, we're seeing an injustice that is so clear, and everyone can see that the guy wasn't running away. It wasn't, a gunshot that just, he was doing a criminal act and then he got shot. We've watched the guy be taken from his car to a police car, dragged onto the floor, and then literally in cold blood murdered. I think anybody who sees that, who has any sense of empathy, is like, no, this isn't right, man. For a person in the position that policeman's in, that should never happen. And then it's also the 3 other officers who were there standing by, and there's no sense of, wait, this isn't the right thing. I think that's why we kind of got that kind of reaction as well, because everybody can relate to the fact that that was wrong. That's just it. And we've seen through the movement in the UK now and across the world, it's the most diverse protest we've ever seen in the life of the death of a black man. So for that, Chanelle, I wanted to ask you as a psychotherapist, what does it do to the mind of a person or even a collective as we are black people who have consistently seen our people murdered, where they've seen a lack of justice and no closure because of that. What does it do to us mentally, and how does it affect us having to see this and knowing there's nothing's going to come of it, and there's no justice, no peace? It just continues happening.
I think for a lot of people, they may experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress, so PTSD. And often with PTSD, it's something that you directly experience yourself, but we can also experience vicarious trauma, so trauma that we witness from other people. So like George Floyd, even though we may not be there, we're not even in the same country, it's still something that's traumatic to us and our experiences. And what happens with that, normally our brain processes a memory, any memory, and it's received by the amygdala in the brain, and it's processed by the hippocampus, and it's stored into long-term memory. But when we experience trauma of this nature, the amygdala literally goes offline. It senses that danger, it senses that trauma, and it goes offline. So we're unable to process that memory, unable to process that trauma. And that's where we start to experience depression, anxiety, anger. People might have flashbacks, people might have nightmares about it. And sometimes people are really surprised about the rioting or the looting that comes as a result of something like this. But if you think about trauma, that's literally what it is. People are angry, and it's because they've been unable to process this traumatic memory. So I feel like for a lot of people, that's what they will be experiencing right now: depression, anxiety, anger, all of those feelings of frustration and, just being annoyed that, again, this is something else that has happened. And like you said, maybe it's going to be something that we don't get a conclusion from this. We don't get justice almost from this, as we haven't had so many times before. And I think that's a really difficult thing for a lot of people to experience. And what I would say to that is try and process that trauma for yourself. It's difficult, especially when we might not get a conclusion. Hopefully we do, because it's still early days. But try and process it. Try and figure it out for yourself. Try and acknowledge your emotions that are there. Don't try and file it away into that closet, like I said earlier. Actually be with that emotion, experience it, talk to your family and your friends, other people who are experiencing similar emotions, and allow yourself to experience it so that you can process it and hopefully begin to move on from this, but with change.
So Chanelle, you just mentioned something there, and I wanted to ask you a follow-up to that. So looking at America now and how people are so sustained in their protests and in their riots and stuff, are you surprised to see this reaction now based on the trauma you said and PTSD that they could be experiencing, having seen this for years and years and years? Is this now like a volcanic reaction almost to a sustained period of oppression and abuse and no justice?
No, I'm not surprised, actually. With trauma, we can have single incident trauma. And that's when we witness one traumatic event and we still have all of those symptoms: depression, anxiety, anger. But we're able to kind of process that single trauma and kind of move on and feel okay about it. But as you said, this is trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. So it then becomes something that we call complex trauma. So it's not just the one incident, it's all of these other incidents happening. It's not just the murders of George Floyd and all the other people before him. It's also our own personal experiences. It's also the experiences of our family and our friends, all coming together and having an impact on people's emotional needs and emotional expression. So I'm not surprised that people are out there angry, out there rioting and out there looting, because it's an expression of their traumatic experiences that they've had for many, many, many years. And in order for us to work on that or for that to improve, firstly, the trauma has to stop. And secondly, the people need a time to actually heal from these traumatic experiences that they've had.
Wow. So Simon, I mean, by any stretch of the imagination, you're a success in what you do and in life in general. But I guess we're also still tainted with the mark of just being a black man to anyone who sees you. How does it feel to have attained success and stuff, but also still just be, in the eyes of the police or the common man, a black man? How does that feel?
I think the way I'd answer that question, Adam, is to say that it's just the way I am. You know, we can't take off our blackness when we go out the door. I can't take off the fact that I'm a black man just because I go down the street or go to work. It's just who I am. Mm-hmm. So I don't actually focus on the fact that I'm a black man in that sense. I don't wear it as a badge of any kind. But what I do find is that in certain situations, it becomes that issue. And I think one of the things that that have come out, one of the things that I've seen and I've felt and I've heard speaking to other black guys, is that there is this perception that as a black man, you're a bad person. The images, the kind of narrative that the media play of black people means that if I'm walking down the street and an old white lady's walking towards me, she'll tend to maybe grab a bag. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know why that is. So in that moment, I feel the blackness, yeah? But I try not to wear it as a badge. I try not to wear it as some kind of weight or burden to carry, because I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my people. And I think we should be proud, you know what I mean, to be who we are. And I think a lot of the time we've dumbed down who we are to make other people feel comfortable around us. Yeah. We've done it in the street. You know, I've literally crossed the street, you know, when I've seen that white lady walking down, just to make her feel comfortable. I've done it in the workplace. And I think that with what's happened and certainly in terms of this trauma that you speak about that we're going through, I think a lot of us have just had enough and said, you know what, take it or leave it, because whether I try to make you feel comfortable, you still feel the same way about me. You still feel threatened by me. So it doesn't matter what I do, you're still going to feel the same. So you know what, let me just be me. So that's how I think that a lot of people are going to play it going forward.
So I guess taking on from the experience of you being a managing director as well, have you had situations where you being a black man in that situation has caused issues or been a barrier? What are some of your experiences in that situation?
I think the way I'd answer that question, Adam, is that I'm quite fortunate, to be fair. I think that in the kind of the boardroom, the meeting setting, I've kind of had largely a positive experience. But I think that's mainly down to the fact that when I go into those meetings, I'm either going in as an equal or I'm being sold to. So there's really nothing for me to lose. So I can kind of go in with a little bit of swagger to a certain extent, because that other person or those people can't actually do anything to hurt me or to detriment my business in that sense. But, you know, when I'll go in there with my business partners, you know, there's been more than one occasion over the last, 10 years plus that the questions or the attention will be driven to the others and I'll be kind of sidelined. And it's only when I kind of open my mouth that they realize I've got a brain. And then it's not nice that they're surprised I've got a brain, but you can tell they're surprised at what's coming out of my mouth, because all of a sudden now I'm part of that environment. I'm part of that meeting. But I think that the reality is that from that business perspective, not such a bad thing. Internally, with business partners that I work with, I mean, it's so bizarre. I don't know if I could just share you an experience. I mean, the Sunday before George Floyd was killed, I was actually on the phone the Sunday morning dealing with an incident, which just kind of blew my mind. And basically what had happened is one of the partners that worked with us had uploaded some images onto Facebook. Mm-hmm. And one of the images was of her son with his face blacked up. And obviously I can't have that. You know, I mean, I can't be associated with anybody that's got that running on, because it affects the business. So I called this lady and I said, listen, you know, you have to do something with that post because that can't work. And she had no clue that it was wrong. She was like, you know, we was doing a murder mystery. He was playing a black cricketer, and that was just the character. And I don't see what's wrong with it. And then she's bringing out, I've got black friends and all the rest of it. And there she's getting upset that I'm accusing her almost like of being a racist, but still didn't get, I've got a lot of colored friends.
Oh, no.
So at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm tapping out of this one because this is going nowhere. But I was dealing with that. And no matter what I said to her, didn't get it. And then the very next day, George Floyd.
Wow. It's interesting how few people, I think in the vein of ignorance, they're emotionally attached to the ignorance. It's almost like, hey, this is my life. This is how it's always been. Anything that sways me away from that, I can't accept it because it means a change of my whole concept of how I think about people. And
Yeah.
I've really noticed that a lot recently, especially social media, even friends and people you know, who you've seen comments they're making about the situation, thinking, wait a minute, but I'm actually your friend.
Yeah.
Well, then I've really, like you just said a minute ago, she said she had coloured friends or black friends. A lot of people will say, you know, I've got black friends and that kind of thing, but you're their black friend. Black people aren't in the collective.
Yeah.
You're their friend.
That's the
who happens
one.
to be black.
Yeah.
And in the collective, everyone else is still the, pardon my French, coloured or nignog or whatever you want to call it. But they got to know you, so you're okay.
Yeah.
You're Simon. So what happens to you? He was a good guy. No, he was one of them. But the rest of us are still the.
Agreed.
So I find it really interesting that you're saying that. And I mean, I know you're a massive avid runner. You run marathons for charity and all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, I was just thinking about Ahmaud Arbery and the situation where he's just running down the road. And it made me think of you when I saw it.
Yeah.
Because to us who knows you, everyone knows you're like a high-level successful guy. But on normal road, running at a morning when you run or nighttime when you run, you're just another black guy, innit? So, like, how do you approach that with the mindset? Because you don't even live like in a urbanized city, really, do you? So, like, how do you deal with that, like, as a black man?
You know, so I mean, there's where I live. There's like, you know, there's country roads nearby, and there's no footpaths on there, and there are runners that run on the country road like towards the traffic. But I choose very rarely to do that. You know, and after, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, I was like, no, do you know what I mean? Because you're literally on these country roads, it's the middle of nowhere. You know, there are pickups coming left, right, and centre, vans, and it takes nothing for somebody just to, you know what I mean, just turn the, you know what I mean, or clip you or whatever. And so I tend to drive out of where I live to the city and then run there. And that's where I tend to kind of just get my exercise and, you know, feel that, you know, if I need to jump on the pavement, it's there, you know what I mean? It's that, I am conscious of it. I'm definitely conscious of it. And I was thinking when, what happened in America, you know, could that happen here? But I'm thinking, you know what? It could.
It really could.
It could, you know. Not the man will jump out and shoot me, but the vehicle is, you know, is a weapon. Do you know what I mean? And as you said, it doesn't matter what I do for a living. Doesn't matter what house I live, what car I drive. You're in trainers, shorts, and a t-shirt. You're just a black dude, you know, running up the street. That's it. So, yeah, I am conscious of that.
I think I would say every one of us has developed, I would say, like some idiosyncrasies of what we do and how we behave in certain environments and things we have to think about that nobody else outside of our race has to think about.
Agreed.
Can I go on holiday there? Is it going to be okay when I get there for my kids?
Yeah.
If I walk down this street at night, you know, if I see a group of 10, 15 lads who just come from the pub, am I going to be okay? You know, even when you go to a meeting and that kind of thing, do I have to put on a bit of a different voice and have to wear different clothes? Like, we can't just be ourselves. For the ladies, like our hair, you know, do I have to straighten it to fit into the norm and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
I mean, for you, Britt, we talked about this. We had a situation with Britanie at school where her hair was dyed a colour and they told her she couldn't come to school because it wasn't a natural colour for her skin tone. And another girl who was white, who at the school, had the same colour hair and it was red, but it said it's possible that a white person could have that hair colour, but not for Britanie. So the white girl could have it and Britanie couldn't. So I wanted to share that experience because it was a really interesting build-up. The conclusion was still, you know, we didn't even get it concluded properly. So share that with us, Britanie.
So what happened was I cut my hair. It was June I was in year 12, and I cut my hair short and I decided to dye it like it was a light brown, like almost like honey blondish colour, like just a light brown colour. And like I walked into school and like within like 20 minutes I'd been called to like a senior member of staff, and she told me that she was kind of like patronising me, saying that, oh, you know like what I'm gonna say, and she was basically saying that I couldn't have my hair that colour, and I was told that I need to dye it back to brown. And she was like, because it's not a natural hair colour. And I was like, it is a natural hair colour. And she was like, it's not natural for my skin tone. And that like event set off like loads of things. So my mum was called into school to discuss when I was going to dye my hair back, how I was going to deal with the situation. I remember, because there were only 6 black girls within our year, and we all got together and we wrote a letter to our head of year and we presented it to her, and she like turned that situation around on me to say that she couldn't believe I got like these girls to like come and gang up on her. to like come and speak to her, and that spoke about my character. And in the end, the resolution that the school came up with was that I needed to cover my hair for the rest of the school year, and that when it came back in September, they expected my hair to be back brown or black. And it was, for me, it highlighted just, I feel like up until then, I had never directly experienced institutional racism that was so blatant, because it was so obviously racist. And for me, it was like I was being gaslighted for them to be like, why am I making it about race? When it's like, you made it about race. Like, you introduced what is natural for my skin tone and what's not natural for my skin tone. And it's like, I feel like black girls, like, we see hair as something that's like frivolous and like something playful. It's allowed to be something playful for like young white girls growing up. They're allowed to experience what they want to experience with their hair, do what they want, and it's celebrated. But it's so political for black girls. And for me, that really opened up my eyes, just to see how I could be turned into an aggressor in a situation where I was being attacked. But yeah, it wasn't nice. There was no resolution. There was no positive resolution. When I came back in September with my hair blonde, it was almost like I was being harassed until I dyed my hair back. But yeah, that was what happened.
Thanks, Britt. So, Chanelle, I want to come back to you, because this question, we talked about mental health a little bit earlier on, and I think it's something that we don't really talk that much about as black people in general. We are more now, but we haven't in the past. In particular, the church has played a kind of a negative role in the past of dumbing down what mental health really is all about and just saying, just pray and it'll be all right and that kind of thing. I want to ask you as an expert in this, like, what can we do to make sure that we are dealing with our mental health better? And is there a reason why it seems like the system is set up against us as black people? More of us get sections and that kind of thing. Like, I know it's a bit of a tricky question, but can you just bring some more information about that for us?
So that is a tricky question.
Yeah.
And I think it deserves a multifaceted answer, so I'll try my best. But I think, church has traditionally not really talked about mental health in the most positive of light. But I think it goes further back than that. It goes years back into slavery. And whereas in slavery, it was literally be strong or die. Like, our mothers, fathers, children were being killed, being sold into slavery, all of that. So it was literally, you don't talk about your emotions, you be strong or you die. Mm. And even after that, civil rights movements, be strong or you die. When you're getting lynched, people are hunting you down by the KKK, it's still be strong or die. And I think for black people, we've always had to be strong. We've always had to have this strength that other ethnicities don't necessarily have to have. They've never been, sold into slavery. They've never necessarily, had to be chased down by another ethnicity, but black people have. So I think it comes back, the fact that we don't talk about mental health comes back from years and years ago, and it's something that we've learned and it's been passed down generation to generation to generation. And our churches are just a part of that kind of culture that we developed. And I think in our families, in the black community, it's just part of the culture. You black men, be strong. Women, be strong for the men. It's been something that's almost a cultural norm. We don't talk about mental health. And that's why the conversations are only now being had in churches. And I think in terms of what we can do to increase the conversation, it's about recognizing that mental health is the same as physical health. We all have mental health, we all have physical health. And when someone is physically unwell, let's say I've broken my arm, yes, I want the prayer, but I also want to go to the doctor to get it casted. And I think that's the same thing with mental health. Yeah, give me your prayer. I want prayer in this situation, but let me talk to a doctor as well. And I feel like the more that we can begin to see mental health like physical health, the more that we can begin to have these conversations.
Amazing. I think you touched on something there as well, where we have the complex in our blackness of the image of the black woman being superwoman.
Yep.
We have the black woman having to be strong and carry everyone's burden and just never stop. No matter what happens, I'll carry the family, I'll carry the community, I'll support you and be strong all the time. I think that is now taking its toll as well.
Yeah.
It was never set up to be like that. It was never set up for the woman to carry the whole community on her back.
Yeah.
That's why we need to stand together and do it. But I think that's something that comes along with having the opportunity to offload and be aware that our mental health needs to be talked about and dealt with as well.
Yeah. And I think the other part of your question, you was asking about the representation of black people in mental health services.
Yeah.
And yeah, black people, considering we're a minority ethnicity, we are represented in inpatient mental health homes and hospitals. And I think that goes back to institutional racism. Traditionally, we haven't been treated very well in mental health services. So because of that, there's always going to be this stigma or this resistance to wanting to seek mental health treatment in the first place. So we often seek mental health support when we're in crisis, whereas other ethnicities might seek mental health support, as a proactive or preactive measure rather than just responding to a mental health problem. So I think that's why we're overrepresented in mental health services, because we go at crisis rather than as a preventative measure. And also because of the institutional racism, and because there isn't much of an understanding of black culture and black experiences. So what we would see as a normal kind of experience in black society or black communities isn't seen as that in mental health services. So it's treated as an issue, it's treated as a problem. They're sectioned because it's not right. But for us, it may very well just be a normal part of being. Sometimes, it is, of course, a mental health issue that needs that kind of care, but sometimes it's not.
So as we're looking at what's happening now, and I've probably seen, and I said a bit earlier, we've probably seen more murder and trauma than any generation really, in terms of in our faces, on our phones, on our devices and stuff. What can we do now to kind of almost not just become desensitized to it and not just become, just burdened down with this murder porn that they're calling it now? And what can we do as people, and this is for everyone, and what can we do to make sure we don't become just so overwhelmed with it that it just takes over our thinking, our minds?
Yeah. I think definitely take a break from social media and from the news. At the moment, social media is filled with lots of, Black Lives Matters posts and all of the crimes that have been committed against us. And to an extent, yes, you have to keep yourself informed of what's going on and know what's happening to our people, but too much of that is not good. So I would definitely say the first thing to look after your mental health is make sure you're being mindful of how much, input you're receiving. Take time out, plug out of social media, plug out of the news, stop receiving negative news about Black people, and try to receive the positive news, because for all of the crimes and the prejudice and the racism and discrimination that we're witnessing and experiencing, we also have a lot of good things going on in our Black communities. So spend time thinking about that and looking into those news and to those research. All the Black people that, are doing amazing in business, Simon, Britanie in university. There's so many good stories out there. So if you want to receive stories about our community, look for the good news instead of the negative news. So definitely that would be my first tip. Plug out if needed, and make sure you plug out even if you don't need it, because you actually do need it.
Yeah.
And I would say talk. It's so important for us to talk about our experiences, and I think it's easy for us to just see George Floyd and what happened as something else that's happened and kind of move on and, not really address it, not really talk about it. So I think it's really important that we stop and realise it's not normal, it's not fair, it's not right that we're dying, and talk about it. And if needed, talk to a therapist, talk to a counsellor, talk to a psychologist, talk to a doctor, talk to your family and friends if you can, but if you need more professional help, talk to someone, because we're out there and we're available.
Thank you. That's amazing advice, and I definitely would advise anybody who's listening to this today to take the advice of plugging out and letting yourself totally be free of watching the news all the time and seeing all these images of Black people being murdered and just the negative that we see all the time, because it does take its toll on us.
What is critical for me is not so much as people recognizing that Black lives matters. The question is, do they see us as equal? Yeah. That's the question.
Yeah. So, something you said was you got angry, but you didn't sin. Right. And I think a lot of us as Christians are struggling with the idea of keeping, I guess what the Bible says is turn the other cheek, and we're asked multiple times to be peaceful and turn the other cheek and look the other way and come on, let's work together, let's try and educate the people that are actually oppressing us. I think a lot of us are sick and tired of that now, but as Christians now, because we're the Christians, we're meant to do the right thing, how does the Christian movement in the church have an influence on dealing with this injustice now?
If you recall last year, I said we wouldn't have allowed this year. Mm-hmm. There was 2 or 3 things why I said so. Number one, financial constraints, because I felt that we were spending a lot of money on these conferences, and I didn't see the change within the organization I'm in. I wanted to see, number one, or the contribution, number 2. But also, I now realize that we are doing things as a culture in the church, as a habit, and there are greater issues at hand. We can have local conferences, local churches, our districts, our regions. We don't always have a mega event when there are underpinning issues that's not been dealt with. So for that reason, I'm now saying to the church that in my mind, and to my colleagues in Birmingham and other places, I'm saying, look, we have to now come together. We are what we call the Council of Black Majority Churches. We now have Faith in Action and whatever else out there. I'm not too concerned about these names unless they're going to unite us as a people to come together with a clear objectives, missions as to how we can support our community. Now, in the recent pandemic, we've seen who are dying first for different reasons. We see who is in the front line when they're saying support the NHS. You see who's facing them there. So what I'm saying to you, that we have to get together as a church, body of people, and put our denomination aside and find the common good that impact everyone in our communities and put our money where our mouth is. I don't want us to go to council for money. There are enough churches in this city and the region to come together and say, we'll invest some real money in this initiative to ensure we have what it requires to help us put things in place to confront issues. And also, I'm saying, in every city in this country, in the United Kingdom, every city where our people are, let's find some chapters in there. And let's work together based on a common vision, based on where we are, but also work together so if there are issues like these present itself, we come together as one voice, maybe 3 or 4 persons we have to speak, who are qualified, knowledgeable, wise enough to hold the fort and speak on our behalf, and speak to the issue, those who can change it. We must also look at the culture of our community, the culture of our city, the culture of the police, the culture of the hospital, NHS, the culture of the ambulance services, of the school, of the universities. We've got to find the cultures. Now, a lot of us preachers want to live out of the community. We should live near enough in it or close enough to it, to walk in it, to see what's happening in it. That's where we should be now. And look at the bigger picture. We as a church have enough people, skilled people, educated people, who are willing to serve and work. Let's bring them together and see what gift they can bring to the table, because we are a voice, not a loud voice by noise, but being clear in what we see and what we want to do about it and how we'll do it together.
Brit, as a young person, you're politically aware and you're involved heavily in understanding what's going on in politics right now and stuff. So how can we, and more so young people, get involved in making sure this change does come and there's a difference? Even though we're here in England and a lot of it's happening in America, there's stuff here that needs to be dismantled and totally broken in terms of the systems and stuff. So what can we do here? And I guess your generation is the one that's going to make it happen. So what can you advise your other young people to do to make change happen?
I think the most important thing that we can do is try and be active in our stance against anti-blackness, in our stance against oppression, in all of this. I think what Chanelle was saying about taking the time out to breathe and just take care of yourself is important. But we also need to take advantage of the momentum that we have and take active roles in trying to dismantle this. And that's not necessarily everyone on the forefront is going to be an organizer or a protester. Perhaps like your active role in this is poetry, or your active role in this is art, or your active role is talking to people, being someone who can facilitate constructive and well-meaning conversation that gets somewhere. So I think that what we can all do as young people is try and be active. I'd say for me, the thing that I've been trying to echo and trying to get out there is those who are able to donate where you can. This is like where social media comes in hand, although it's like somewhere that's really triggering to be at the moment, where you're like constantly seeing these images of black people being brutalized. Social media is a place where we can get a lot of information about useful resources of web sites we can donate to, funds that we can donate to. And even if you're unable to donate out of your own pocket, YouTube has made it in a way that there are YouTubers out there who are just, if you just play their videos, the ads and the ad revenues are going straight to Black Lives Matter movements. So it's not necessarily that you have to be economically or financially privileged in order to make a change. Signing petitions is one way that you can be active as well, and it takes like 2 minutes, but they matter. And I think if you just take the time to sign petitions, take the time to email people, email the heads of your universities, email the heads of your schools, your MPs, people who are in the position to incite some type of change. I think also what we should do, if we're trying to create change, if our goal is to create this peaceful state and we want peace in our communities, then we have to dismantle the violent institutions around us. And that requires creativity. It requires more than just academics. You need to mobilize your creatives in here who can conceptualize some type of system, some type of society that doesn't necessarily require a violent police state. And although like it's hard for us to even conceptualize what does our society look like without the police, or how can we create, or like the question might be, how can we make the police safe? To even like ask that question, you have to recognize that the police is not a caretaker for the majority. The police, to black communities, to me, is a figure of harm. And in trying to move forward, in trying to create something peaceful, we need to stop looking for reformation. And what we should try and do is create new things, create new systems. We can't reform an institution that in its groundworks is racist. Like the police come from slave patrols. I've been hearing it time and time again. This system didn't fail us. It's treating us exactly how it was set up to treat us. And so in trying to look forward to somewhere that this isn't happening, where we aren't constantly seeing like the police brutality towards black people, we need to create new institutions.
I think something you touched on there, we definitely need to institute in our communities is us being a part of the institutions that are making decisions.
It's not even being politically motivated, because I think being black in itself is something that is already political. But it is about like being actively engaging in this. Like this conversation, this time won't come around again. There's not going to be momentum like this again. We're never all going to be in this vulnerable position. And I feel like what we need to do is jump on it. So you be active in whatever way you can, because it's not just the organisers and the protesters that are important. Every one of us are important. We all play a role in dismantling anti-blackness in our society. And I think that we all just need to see how we can utilise our strengths, utilise our talents in doing so. I know people like my sister, her talent is poetry, like she has a way with words. And she has like utilised that to communicate what is so hard for a lot of us to express. I have a friend who does like art, and he's like using this talent to sell pictures and sell images that speak his pain. Although these are like non-traditional ways to be involved in such a political movement, they're useful ways, and we shouldn't disregard them. Yeah.
That's good. That point there is pivotal, I think. A lot of us are looking for everyone to shout, maybe run down the streets protesting and saying Black Lives Matter, which is, there's people whose calling is to be protesters and to literally be on the street every day. However, you also need to put ourselves in positions where we can be influential in boardrooms, influential on school boards where there's kids being kicked out of school, black boys who are at an indiscriminate rate of exclusion compared to other kids. It's just ridiculous. And we know that, we've all seen it. So we need to put ourselves in the positions where we can defend our own first. We need to get people into the boardrooms of these big companies who are having like zero ethnic minorities in their boards and in their. You can go to a company and be the only black person, for example. That shouldn't be happening these days. We've got to have diversity, but we've also got to be in a position to put ourselves in a place. So it means you going to university now isn't just about getting a qualification. It's about you getting yourself qualified to be in the position we need you to be in politics to make change. We can all stand on the street and shout, but the people in the room are the ones that are making the decisions. So we need to get people in the room around the table. And that's what we want you guys to be doing. And that's why I love what you said about taking different creatives and different mediums of being activists, which could be art, it can be poetry, it can be speaking, it can be whatever it is, and using that to make sure that we make as much noise as possible in our own lanes. So in talking about the boardroom in employment and stuff, Simon, in your company as the MD, what have you done or what do you plan to do to make sure that your company is standing in solidarity with your black employees, and also are there any policies or things that you guys will look at differently now in terms of making sure that you are diverse in the right ways and make sure you're planning and preparing for your ability to be part of the solution, and also just not in words but in action as well?
From my perspective, I'd like the company to be a catalyst for change. And so internally, first of all, you know, it's very important for me to, when I'm traveling around our offices, to be seen. You know, I don't necessarily have to go into the various departments, but I make sure that I'm seen, because it's important to me, you know, that they are majority white. See, you know, who's at the top of the company, because it sends a message psychologically to them that actually about hierarchy and about progression and about hopefully changing their paradigm in where they see what a successful black man looks like. One of the things that we're quite active in is, you know, like work experience. Students that are near our offices will come in and work, you know, part-time and so on to make their money up. And I'm quite instrumental in making sure that there's a diverse mix on that front. But outside of that, I think the biggest change that, you know, we in the business community can make is really just by networking, is really just by making ourselves stronger. I could say I'm an island and our company's going to do this and we're going to do that. But I think as a community that it is better for the community that the black business owners in that community come together, that we share best practice, that we share what good looks like, and that we're an example and a role model to those, you know, those black kids coming up through the system of what is possible. And whilst they may not want to run a company, as you said, you may want to go, like Britanie, into politics, into you know, the medical field. You may want to go into the legal field, whatever it might be. But as you said, I think it's so important that now we just change not only the paradigm of society, but our own paradigm. Because, you know, we got to be real. Black on black crime happens, yeah? It's real. And I know that some people would try and use it as an excuse and, well, you know, Black Lives Matter, well, why don't they matter to you? I think we've got to just get away from that narrative and realize that the answer to where we're going is actually in us. We are the start of the solution. And so I think that networking, drawing together, building that community outward, and stop being so kind of insular in terms of what we're doing as a community, but also as a black business community, will really affect some massive change.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap up, I want to ask all of you the same question, really. And it's really how, despite what's going on around the world now and how it's all very disheartening and angering and all sorts, you know, we're feeling just, some of us are feeling like there's no hope. What role does your faith play in making sure that you don't fall down that rabbit hole of just hopelessness? What does that play in your life, and how can you encourage anyone at home to take the same path as well? I'll start with you, Britt, and then we'll come across.
I think during all of this time, my faith has helped me, like, just to, like, legitimize my feelings. Like, I think Chanelle was saying how, like, we will feel angry, because like this is a time where everything seems like everything is against us. And I feel like my faith has helped me to see like anger as not just like this frivolous emotion that's like not productive, but it is a genuine feeling. Like Jesus was angry at injustice, like the oppressive society around him literally like disgusted him, like, and I feel like that has helped me to see that like it's okay to be angry, as long as you're channeling your anger towards some type of change. Also, I think my faith has helped me to like even like spur me on to say that this is something that you need to be involved in, because activism, it isn't just like this spectacle, it isn't something that is just like disruptive, it's also biblical. In Proverbs it talks about how you should speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. You should try and declare justice for those who've been crushed. And I feel like throughout this, that's the one word that I can say describes like what black people have been going through. Like we're constantly being crushed, like whether it's physically with police brutality. And I feel like my faith has helped me see that this is something that I should be feeling, and this is something that I definitely should be acting upon, because it's not just societal, it's not just social, it's biblical. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And same to you, Mr. Simon.
I don't think, as Britanie said, that we should be ashamed of our feelings. You know, we are human at the end of the day. We are feeling beings. But for me, I suppose without faith, it's like, where would I go? You know, where would my outlet be? And, you know, they have a saying in the world that says, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved. And we have a Savior in Jesus who is able to stand there in the gap for us, because I'm not strong enough to do it for myself. I'm not strong enough to watch that video from start to finish. I don't have the strength to do that. I don't have the strength to process the emotions. I don't have the strength to process where is it all going to end. But certainly with my faith, it enables me to kind of have an outlet to share those feelings, and to, you know, I don't have to make sense of them. I can share them with the Lord. You know, and Jesus said that, you know, my peace I give unto you, my peace I leave with you, not as the world giveth I unto you. And the reality is that we have his peace. You know, we have his joy. Yes, the devil doesn't come to steal, kill, and destroy, but he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So, you know, we have the word, and when I don't have the words, I have the word. Does that make sense? And that helps me to make sense of what I'm going through, because I really give God thanks for Jesus, because I know that without my faith, I would literally probably end up in one of Chanelle's institutions, to be fair, because I know I would, because I know that individually Simon Wright cannot process all that stuff, and I have the propensity, not every black man, but I know I would have the propensity to end up in an institution, and the only reason I'm not there is because of God.
All right. Chanelle?
And I basically just echo what Simon and Britanie said. I think my faith has been so important during this time to keep me through this time. And I think, you know, our community, it's so easy to feel like alone and isolated, but we know that we're never alone because God is always with us. And I feel like God, he knows our hearts. He knows how difficult this time is for each and every one of us, and how each person is individually coping and managing it. And we don't even have to say it. He already knows. But I think during this time, praying has been so good, and it's been something that I've really needed to do more of during this time, especially when, you know, you're seeing the deaths. It makes you angry, and without praying or like taking it to God, it can make you want to act in your flesh. So praying about it has been so key, and, you know, listening to worship music has been really useful as well, as always during this time. But I think it's important to remember that God sees the injustice, and even though we may want justice now and in our time, God's timing is always perfect. and he will do something about it. And that's it.
Those some great words. I think I echo all of that and say, if it wasn't for God, then I would have been on the streets acting like a madman. That's just the reality of it. So I'm grateful for God's grace in my life, knowing that if it wasn't for him, I'd probably be with you, Minister Simon, Chanelle's place.
Go together, brother.
After having done some mad things. But for those of you at home, I just want to remind you guys of the main points of what's been said today. We've had Chanelle today who talked to us about our mental health and reminding us to sometimes just unplug, sometimes just disconnect, sometimes just let ourselves break away from the world of social media and the news and just kind of have some peace, because what we're seeing right now is disturbing and it's not good for our mental health. We need some time to break free of that. And for Minister Simon, who talked to us about how in even the world of business now, it's about using your position of power to create influence and create opportunities for other people that look like you, and also to make sure that when people see that you're operating at the level you are, it does break down some barriers in their mind as what we're capable of as a people. To see your boss, the top boss as a black man, kind of changes some people's perspective on, oh, if you can do that, then others can do it too. And then to Britanie, who's studying to become our first black prime minister, who one day will be in a position to make and institute change in this country. But right now, she's sharing with us that as young people, use your gifts to make a difference. Everyone has a different lane to go in, and if you're a young person who's into art, into music, into creativity, into spoken word, whatever it is you're into, use that as your method of making a difference. Don't think you have to fall in line with everybody who's doing the same thing. Not everybody's born to protest. Not everyone's born to walk on the street. Some people can speak in a video and make a change from Instagram. So don't think you have to do what everyone else is doing to make a difference. Guys, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for your wise words and for sharing your experiences. It's been an amazing experience for me, and I'm really looking forward to doing this again with you sometime. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hello, 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 New Jerusalem, Apostolic family. God, I miss you guys so much, man, and I love you guys so much. But to my wider church family, to the whole body of Christ, the kingdom, we are truly in our unprecedented time in the world's history on a global stage. From COVID-19 to Black Lives Matter, the terrain has truly been shifted and shaken. But I believe that this is a time now that the true sons of God, and when we manifest the power and the authority of Christ, that people will see our Father, will see the light, will get direction, will get counsel. To our community, global black community, we as the body of Christ stand in solidarity, in love, in prayer and action during this very painful time that we're going through as a community. And I just want to encourage you with a few thoughts, because I had to look, and for me, when I'm going through these things and I feel the emotion, I have to kind of like really practice like the principles that you learn about going on my knees and praying. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. It's times like this where I have to go into Psalms 91 and say, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. When I have to really believe in Proverbs 3, and it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he shall direct your path. But my encouragement to us to consider is, what are you willing to die for? You see, when we think about Jesus Christ, his life was truly mission focused. He came so that on that day on Calvary, when he died for our sins, that we could have life and life more abundantly. Thank you, Jesus. And when we think about the horrendous pain and punishment that Christ went through for me and for you, we know that we have the ultimate role model who literally took it to death to fulfill his mission and mandate. So my question to you today is, what are you willing to die for? What will you be remembered for? Because we know how we remember Christ. He wasn't passive. He spoke truth to power. He didn't come to play games. And I want to just get us to think about, not even just Christ alone, but the Bible is full of examples where leadership stood up and God used leadership. When we think about Moses and how God used Moses to speak to Pharaoh and to set the people free. When we think about how Daniel protested in his prayer when the king, Darius, made a decree that no one should pray. He went against the decree and continued to pray 3 times a day. And actually caused him to go into the lion's den. And even in the lion's den, God was with him. We think about phenomenal leaders like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who when the whole government, the whole country, the rulership, King Nebuchadnezzar made a decree and wanted everyone to bow, they refused to bow. When we think about the little shepherd boy, David, who took on Goliath, I want to encourage you that this is not a time to be afraid. This is not a time to be afraid. This is not a time to be afraid. This is not a time to be afraid, but to rise up in power, authority, and anointing and conviction and speak truth to power. Let us use the anointing and the authority. Last week we spoke about Pentecost. Let us use that fire now to go and burn through governmental systems, policies. Let's be strategic in our response. Let us use the authority that God has given us as men and women of God to make a difference, to let Black lives particularly know that the church of Jesus Christ, that Christ cares for their life and their injustices. This is the time where we can educate people. This is the time where we can train people. This is the time where we can stand alongside people and allow them to feel our love and our care. Family, I had to take time out. I had to cry before God. This has not been easy. I had to say, Lord, you are my strength. I said, God, you are my strength. God, help me. I said, God, I feel weak. I can't move. I had to cry out to God in prayer and I say, Lord, I worship you. Like, withholding nothing, I had to say, God, I cried out to God in prayer, in worship, and I said, God, you are my strength like no other. And it's in times like this, guys, they're like, let's just keep it real. The church can never be the same again. COVID-19 was like a big wake-up call. But Black Lives Matter and what's happening globally is like the straw that has just broken something. And we know deep in our hearts that we cannot go back to business as usual, because I'm not interested in it. I'll be honest with you. There has to be a radical difference. We as a church family are talking about managing change. Our sub-theme for this year, 2020, we came into this year saying evangelism, evangelism, evangelism. This is the time now to stand up and stand side by side with people, to let them see the love of Christ, the love of Jesus, to let them know that we care for them and that we are practical in our response, that Black people, that other people from other cultures and nations know that this ain't a black and white issue, but this is a fight against spiritual wickedness in high places. It's against a philosophy, a mindset, a spirit of racism. When I prayed, this is what I heard back. The blood is crying out. I'm trying to hold it together, guys. It's so hard. The blood is crying out. I says, God, what do you mean? He says, go back to the root. The first ever time that blood was shed, recorded in the earth, was between 2 brothers, Cain and Abel. The older brother killed the younger brother because of jealousy. And I'm saying, God, what are you trying to show me? And he's like, think about the questions that I asked. And I said, what are the questions? And the first question that God asked was, where's your brother? and what have you done? And I was like, where is your brother? And what have you done? There's something about responsibility. I believe the Hebrew or the Greek word for brotherhood means fence. I'm asking everybody that's listening to this, are you your brothers and sisters' keeper? Because to fight this, we're going to have to go back to the root of things. Because God said, I hear the blood of your brother crying out from the ground. And then asked him, where is your brother? What have you done? When we see the injustices that are happening globally against black people, and not just people, but people in different spheres, like, what have you done? What have we done? I believe that the reason why this is shaking the earth is that the blood is crying out from the ground in the spirit realm. And those who have ears can hear the cries of a generation that has been abandoned, that has not had justice, of deaths, of blood, that's in the streets, that's in the community, in the world, crying out from the ground. And I believe God has given us his blood, the blood of Jesus Christ, to move in power, to move in anointing, to make a difference, to set people free from the bondage, to set people free from their hurt, from their pain, from their anger, from their rage. I believe that the blood is crying out. And God is asking us, what are we going to do about it? So I end with 3 questions. What are you willing to die for? There's no good with saying goodbye, world. I stay no longer with you. But we're full of the world and its lusts and its desires. Are you willing to die to the world to live spiritually so that we can make a difference? When you die, just like when Christ died, we remember him as the Messiah. When you die, what will you be remembered for? And last question, what are you going to do? We've been praying, we've been talking. Now our actions are going to have to speak louder than ever before. So remember, the Bible gives us encouragement. Many leaders God uses for such a time like this, for different times of crisis. Moses raised up in a time of great challenge from the government. The 3 Hebrew boys refused to bow to the pressures of the system and got thrown into the fire, but God protected them in the fire. Daniel continued to pray and trust God. Continued, even when a decree was made, and was even thrown into the lion's den, and the king was like, oh my God, please, may your God protect you. And Daniel's God did. The great I am. I believe God is watching us intently to see what our next move would be. New Jerusalem, and for the body across the world, this is not a time to be silent, but we need to push. We need to stand up and be counted. We need to let the world know that all lives matter, but with this particular issue, Black lives truly do matter, and we need to see justice, because the blood is truly speaking. My name is Nathan Dennis. I go to New Jerusalem Apostolic Church in Birmingham, England, and I just want to encourage you to find Christ in this crisis. God bless you. God love you. Be encouraged. Do not fear. Do not fear, for God is with you always, even to the end of the earth. Take care. God bless you.
If this is your first time with us today, we're so happy that you chose to join us. If you want to find out more about us, visit us online at newjchurch.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and right here on YouTube by searching for NewJ UK. We would love to connect with you. Thank you for worshiping with us today. We are NewJ Church Online, and we are your online church. We love you, we're here for you, and we're praying for you. See you next week.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When the darkness appears and the night it draws near, and the day is almost gone. Had the river I'll stand, guide my feet, please hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm just so tired, and I'm weak, and I'm worn, yeah. Through the storm, through the night, precious Lord.